it is through exercise and nutrition that we're seeing recovery actually happen.
Someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
We have a stellar guest joining us today, Phil Palmer. He's the president and executive director of Warrior WOD. And as a Marine Corps veteran and successful leader, Phil has dedicated his life to helping his fellow veterans recover from invisible wounds. Through Warrior WOD, he prioritizes exercise and nutrition as prescriptions for post-traumatic stress and other challenges. Phil's commitment extends beyond his work to being a loving father, husband, skydiver, and active community member. Get ready to be inspired as we explore his journey and the incredible impact he's making. Phil, welcome to the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm stoked to be on here, Danny. I really am.
Well, I've enjoyed getting to know a little bit about you in our pre-show, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about your past. What was life like growing up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, born and raised. I'm one of the very few that's actually been born and raised and still live here. But good childhood. When I was 4 years old, my parents split and I lived with my father. And my father was kind of the example of what a father should be. He worked construction, and I remember him going without so that my sister and I could have lunch the next day. Like, he wouldn't eat dinner so that he could prepare for us. And that's the example that I had. Growing up, I wouldn't have known the difference that we were not financially secure. He made sure that we were well taken care of. And his example is what kind of led me to, going in the military, going to the Citadel, and some of the things that I'm doing now. Just a phenomenal example. But grew up in Charleston, wrestled, played football. I was okay at both of them, never really great at any of them. And ended up after high school going to the Citadel. And it was one of those things that I got to my junior year and I was talking to the guidance counselor, and they basically said I wasn't going to college. My grades were terrible. I had a very solid C average. This was just not going to get me into a big name school, USC, Clemson, University of Georgia, any of those names wasn't really an option. But I also wrestled, so I had my eyes on the Citadel because I knew they had a wrestling program. Ended up going to a private school my senior year, largely just to take a bunch of AP classes, just to get my GPA up enough so that even the Citadel would accept me. And then managed to get through that and found myself in the Citadel in the August of 2001. So that kind of is, in a nutshell, my childhood.
Now, the Citadel, from what I was able to discover, it's like the military school of South Carolina. It's one of the highest rated military academies, I think, along the Eastern Shoreline. Is that right?
It is. We also have the Naval Academy in West Point and the Air Force Academy, and all of them are phenomenal service schools. The Citadel is kind of different in the sense that they're not a service school. I was there for 9/11. Literally, I signed the paperwork through the OSO to get commissioned in the Marine Corps 7 days before 9/11 happened. So imagine that. Like, I'm going into a peacetime. 7 days later, I find out that the Twin Towers were attacked, and Colonel Lake became General Lake. Came in and said, "Gentlemen, all of y'all will find yourself deployed at some point in the very near future." So that was a bit of a wake-up call. But all of the service academies, had that same thing happen in 2001. The difference is the Citadel historically has roughly 30% of their graduates going into the military. My graduating class probably had 45 to 50% that actually went into the military in some capacity.
Wow. And to join the Marine Corps without knowing that a war is about to break out, what led you to that decision as you were entering college?
You know, brainwashing, quite frankly. And so I talked about my grandfather, and my father. Another exceptional role model in my life was my grandfather. He did multiple tours in Vietnam. He retired as a first sergeant. Growing up, every month he went to the Marine Corps League. Every year he did Toys for Tots, and I'm not talking about just donating. He started working on Halloween and worked every day until Christmas Eve for Toys for Tots and volunteered for that. And the Marine Corps is just a part of his life. Even to today, he turns 90 next month, and he lives, breathes the Marine Corps. He even gets a high and unnecessary still. Every single Monday he goes and gets a haircut, right? So when I was a kid, some of my fondest memories was going down to Parris Island and watching Family Day and watching the recruits graduate. And he did that, pretty much most of my childhood throughout the summer. That was a tradition of ours. And it was one of those things that I knew I was going to go in the Marine Corps. I didn't understand the implications between officer enlisted, boot camp, OCS. But when I was graduating high school and I had the option to go to the Citadel, he told me that was the best move for me to do, is go get an education and then get commissioned. So I followed his suggestion, but I don't think not going into the military was an option. It was just one of those things that I knew that was where my destiny was going to take me.
It's always great to have those mentors in our lives that are always looking out for our best interest and teaching us ways to continue to grow. And I'm glad that your grandfather was able to fill a portion of that role in your childhood as well as your dad. So where did your military career end up taking you?
Yeah, so I was commissioned in May 5th of 2005. And I literally walked the stage at Citadel, got my commission, packed up my truck, and drove to Quantico. And I did about 2 months at TCOM as a lieutenant that had any training before I even went to the basic school. Did 2 months there, started to understand training at a very basic level. And then I started the basic school in June of 2005. I finished the basic school in December, was selected as an intelligence officer, and then found myself at Dam Neck, Virginia. Did intel school there, and then showed up to the G2. And it was one of those things, and I know that you were on a MIT team as well, a combat advisor. But I was a male that happened to walk through the doors at the right time, and I barely even checked in. It was do not pass go, do not collect $200. You're going down to division, and you're going to be on a MIT team. And so my first deployment was with MIT 0111, and what a phenomenal group of people that I was with. Colonel Lively was Captain Lively then. Talk about a great leader. What an inspiration. And he paved the way for the rest of my career. But I was also surrounded by 3 other lieutenants that have all deployed. 2 of them were Mustangs as well, so they had experience time. And it was just a wealth of knowledge that was just poured into me. 22-year-old kid that didn't really know anything, and I was blessed to have some of the best role models and peers that could have asked for. That deployment was very chaotic. We were there from October 2006 to October 2007. Got to see the Sunni Awakening. We were in Ramadi, which was considered one of the most deadly places at the time. Days before Mansour, a Navy SEAL, was killed, and which led to him getting the Medal of Honor. Days before where we were going to actually set up shop. So, you could imagine that was a very chaotic environment. And through that year, we saw, some of the most devastating things, but then towards the end, it turned into more humanitarian assistance. We were able to clear Ramadi. We made an impact. And I don't think there's many people that get the privilege of seeing the full spectrum of war, from very chaotic to humanitarian assistance in one deployment. And so that helped pave the way to the rest of my career as well. Came back, spent a little bit of time at the G2, and then was selected to go to the basic school as a instructor, and ultimately became SPC, or Staff Platoon Commander there. Did my time there, went to the MACE, Martial Arts Center of Excellence, and got to, and again, another moment of privilege, was able to work under Colonel Shisco, who is kind of the father of the Marine Corps Martial Arts program. Finished that up, and then realized that it was time for me to exit right. I've accomplished what I wanted in the Marine Corps. So in my last year, instead of moving me back down to Lejeune, I stayed in Quantico and worked at Training and Education Command. So you see the full circle. I started at Training and Education Command before the basic school, and then I left the Marine Corps at Training and Education Command. And that was an interesting tour as well. I became the OPSO for Security Force Assistance for the Marine Corps. Got to represent the Marine Corps for NATO. Went to the Netherlands and was able to make impacts for some of our allies and their security force assistance program. So that was really a good way to leave the Marine Corps, is making impacts at the strategic level as well. So overall, great career in the Marine Corps. Every day people ask me, do you miss it? And I miss the men and women I served with. I'm not sure I missed some of the work that I was doing.
Absolutely understandable. When you were talking about being a military advisor in Iraq, just a few hours south of where I served as military advisor as well, those Marines that I served with, I was an E4 junior, just like yourself. I think I was 22 as well. And to have such experience speaking into you at such a early portion of your career, at least for me, it really gave me a lot of inspiration to want to make it a 20 or 30 year career on the enlisted side, because you do get to see the impact that you have of pouring into individuals and helping train them, making sure that they are able to accomplish the mission and, for the most part, get home safely. So as you're going through your career and interacting with some of these mentors and leaders and high profile service members, what was the catalyst that made you say, you know what, it's probably time for me to, as you said, exit right?
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure I've actually thought through that, but I was a captain at the time, and I knew the major selection boards were coming up. And I'm 90% sure this came from Colonel Lake, who was the Marine officer in charge at the Citadel, now was General Lake, Director of Intelligence. And we both happened to be in the Northern Virginia area. And I bumped into him occasionally, but he had he was trying to advise me of where my career is going to go next. And he said something to the effect of, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but he made the comment that every Marine officer comes in as a thoroughbred, but every thoroughbred has to go to pasture at some point to let new thoroughbreds in. And he alluded to the fact that as a major, I was going to go to pasture for a while. And I started thinking about it, and at TCOM, it's a sea of majors. And I started asking some of these individuals, what does their career progression look like? And it was, for the next 8 years, you're going to be operations officers, XOs, but, don't expect any command. And then if you're lucky, you can become a battalion commander. And if you're lucky, it will be at a time of war. Otherwise, it's like babysitting a school of kids, right? And so I heed that warning. But the other piece was I started looking around at my peers and the guys that you're like, this guy's going to be a general. This guy is, a stud, rock star. and they were leaving. And I had the opportunity to ask one of them, like, why are you leaving the Marine Corps? You're destined to have a star. And he said, I'm good here. I know that I'm good here. Imagine how good I could be in the civilian world. And that also kind of resonated with me. Not saying that I was great or good, but it was one of those things that I was curious what was out there and how I could perform in the civilian world.
Absolutely understandable. So how did you begin the transition out from TCOM?
Yeah, so I put in my letter of resignation when I was at the Mace. And so I knew that I had about 9 months left. So while I was at TCOM, I had the opportunity to talk to a headhunter that helped pave the way. And it was one of those where you show up for a weekend and they have 10 interviews lined up, right? And so, and I knew I just wanted to do operations. I was going to run a factory or, logistics or some kind of operations. And the guy, his name's John Zornick, kept saying, hey, you need to go into sales. I'm like, I don't think so. That's not me. I'm a Marine officer. I don't understand anything about sales. Like that's just not my cup of tea. He's like, do one interview for me, just one interview. And so I did. And I remember this very vividly. I walked into the room and who became my district manager, Randy Allen, looks at me and says, nope, you can leave. You don't have what it takes to be in sales. And then I spent the hour interview overcoming his objections and saying why I should be in sales. And he hired me on the spot because I was willing to fight, right? And since then, this is just a plug for all your listeners that may be hiring military. I personally believe that being a military leader inherently makes you good at sales, right? Because every single day as a leader, you've got to earn the respect. You've got to show those that you're leading and those that are adjacent why they should respect you and why they should follow you. And there's no rank in combat, right? Every day you're earning that and you're overcoming objections and you're selling them on why they should risk their life potentially to follow you. And so for all your listeners, hire military for the sales positions. They inherently get it. They may be a little rough around the edges, but you could train them to, be a little bit more finesse, but they're richly deserving and they have the skills.
That's a great plug to make that transition. And I know that there's a lot of opportunity available in that field, as well as a lot of influence that you can end up developing through that. But it does not come without its own personal stress because a lot of your income then comes down to your personal effort. While you were transitioning out of the military and starting your new life, did you start to encounter any challenges that you noticed, especially like within the culture or anything that you had experienced during your time in combat?
Yeah, so great question. I think that when we really talk about like some of my struggles, I found myself in New Orleans and quickly, had a circle of friends. And I'll tie this back into skydiving here in a few minutes because I know that you mentioned that earlier. But I had a circle of friends. The problem was none of them have served. And so I was already dealing with some of my demons and still having some of my struggles. And so it was one of those things where every one of those friends thanked me for my service. Every one of those friends sympathized. But what I didn't have was empathy. I didn't have someone like you that I could, talk about my time deployed and you, as I'm talking about my story, you inherently feel it, right? And then you can rely on me to do the same thing. I missed that. We call it talk therapy. We could call it a million other things. But I think there's something, whether it's a shipmate or a battle buddy, there's something really powerful about having that camaraderie. And that's what I missed. I said it a few minutes ago. I don't miss the job that I did. What I do miss, every day I wake up, wish that I still had was the men and women that I served with still around me. because that camaraderie was the one thing that I was lacking more than anything, and probably was the one thing that I needed the most recovery from.
Now, I know that the bonds that are forged out there on the battlefield with our peers, they're everlasting, and a lot of the times, you mentioned at the top of the show, you're the only person that really ever went back to your hometown in Charleston after the military, and so we encounter a lot of the same people that we knew in high school or knew in college. They're still there. They didn't have our experiences. And I know for myself, I intentionally avoided contact with new service members, especially out in Hawaii. It's such a transient community. I didn't want to keep on dealing with having to make new friends. And then those that were sticking around were usually like in things like the VFW, where, they're generations ahead of me. For yourself, did you notice any of that while you were in New Orleans and back in your hometown of Charleston?
Yeah, so in New Orleans, and then I later moved to Houston, I definitely struggled with the social aspect of things, right? And I had acquaintances. I had a very few close friends, but like I said, couldn't really empathize with what I was going through. When I moved home, I have an amazing wife at this point. And when we moved from Houston to Charleston, she was my fiance, later became my wife. She helped bridge the gap a little bit. Her dad, Marine Corps vet from Vietnam, although she didn't serve, she saw some of the struggles that he went through. And so that was a rock for me. But soon after I came back to Charleston is when we started Warrior WOD. And before that, we were already dabbling in how we can support other veterans. We were donating through another business journey that we had. And to me, that helped a little bit, is knowing that I was able to pay it forward a little bit. But through Warrior WOD, I have that camaraderie now. That has led to being the chair for the Low Country Veterans Engagement Team, which is a coalition of veteran support organizations. I think there's 20 veteran support organizations that are working together alongside the VA. And that connection has helped tremendously. And then every single day I'm interacting with veterans with Warrior WOD. I benefit just as much as they do from that interaction. I've been on onboarding calls for a new cohort for the last couple of days. And I get excited to talk to these individuals, and I get excited to give them the opportunity to find their journey to recovery. But I also get the opportunity and the privilege to interact with them and have a conversation. And it's therapy for me as well, as much as it is for them. So
now, what was driving that social change for you, that you ended up finding a fitness community as kind of the place where you began to grow Warrior WOD and these organizations? I did do a little bit of searching through your social profiles and what I could find online, and it looked like you were part of a rather large group of people that jumped out of a plane for fun. That community didn't necessarily give you all that you needed at the time.
Yeah, so I think to answer this question, we need to take it back a little bit. So I came back from Ramadi. I was wounded in Ramadi. It was merely a flesh wound. Took some shrapnel from IED, and physically healed pretty fast, right? But we lost a lot of Iraqis, and with the Army battalion we were attached to, lost a lot of Americans as well, to include some SEALs, and I came back with mental wounds, and the stigma was at the time, Marine officers, if you want to command, you did not have mental health issues. Now, was that the reality? I don't know, but I know amongst my peers, we all, sucked it up, and because we didn't want to lose our opportunity to lead. And so fast forward to 2013, when I left the Marine Corps, I finally got into the VA system, and it just wasn't working for me. they were given antidepressants, which was numbing some of the memories and some of the demons, but it was also numbing me socially and occupationally. And, I could see that I was not performing at my best. I also, while I was in the military, got my skydiving license, but, I really started jumping out of planes when I left. And what I found now that I have, clear mind and I can reflect in hindsight, I would leave Friday and then go jump out of planes Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. I would do 25 skydives a weekend. We all have our recovery. That was, I needed the chemical, the adrenaline, and that was how I was coping. And so, after 10 years of skydiving, 4,000 skydives, right? What I came to the conclusion was that was my drug. And in the middle of that journey to 4,000 skydives, I also, just on a whim, I was sitting there one day at my house and, I started thinking, I was like, it's been 2 years since I've done any PT. Like, I'm not in shape at all. And, I am not in the cult for CrossFit. I know a lot of people are, but there happened to be a CrossFit gym down the road from my house. And so I joined that, and literally I could run to the gym, work out, run back. It was that close. And it was amazing. You walk in and there's the Marine Corps flag, the Navy flag, the American flag. We do these things called hero WODs to honor our fallen. The person that finishes last got the loudest cheer. And every time you accomplish a new PR or PB, people went berserk celebrating you. And within a year of that, being a part of that community, I was completely off antidepressants. And I didn't feel the urge to go fling myself out of a plane multiple times in the weekend, right? I was getting that camaraderie through exercise, through nutrition, through the people that were supporting me. I was finding some recovery. Now, I continued to skydive, but it wasn't a need, right? Fast forward to 2018, I was part of the world record attempts. So it was 200 people out of 9 different planes. What an amazing experience. But then I got done with that and I felt like there was nothing more for me to accomplish there. So I kind of hung it up. And again, this is after 4,000 skydives and I kind of went cold turkey after that, right? I then moved to Charleston back in 2019 and it was June 19th. And I reached out to a couple CrossFit gyms here because I wanted that community again. And there was one gym in particular, Ironbridge CrossFit, amazing group of people. But Shannon and Donnie, I remember messaging them over Facebook Messenger, and they immediately responded. And I was like, hey, I'm moving to Charleston. I'm looking for a gym. Y'all happen to be pretty close to where I live or where we're buying a house. And they're like, cool. Yes, we absolutely want you. Matter of fact, we'll send our coaches over to help you unpack. And I was like, wait, what? You're going to help me unpack my, truck and put stuff into my, just blew me away. And you already saw that community starting to build around me. I showed up the next day, so on the 20th, and Shannon approaches me and said, hey, you're a veteran, right? And I was like, yes, ma'am, I am. She goes, for the 4th of July, we do this whole week of hero WODs. Every single day we do a new hero WOD and she was like, we want to honor homegrown heroes. So do you have anyone in your life that you lost that you want to do a hero WOD for? And Joshua Booth, Lieutenant Joshua Booth, actually was in Haditha about the same time that you were. He was killed by a sniper the day that I showed up to Ramadi. And so that news traveled to me on my second day. And so I wanted to do a hero WOD for him and to honor him. And so we did that and we finished that. She pulls me aside and says, hey, go talk to this guy over here. And she pointed at this gentleman named Justin Riccio, walked over to him and he was like, hey, awesome workout. Tomorrow we're doing my brother's, Nick Riccio. who was with 2 Marines, was in a battle for Fallujah, got hit by an IED. And you kind of hear the same story. Like, he was in Fallujah, I was in Ramadi, hit by an IED. He came home and went down a dark place. His was drugs and alcohol. I went to another chemical, skydiving and adrenaline, right? So there's a lot of similarities. The difference is that he ends up, after 10 years, overdosing and ends up losing his battle, right? And so I'm talking to Justin about this. And Justin, being the younger brother, followed in his footsteps. He was going into drugs and alcohol. And once his brother overdosed, he took a step back and said, I've got to do something different. And he went to fitness and CrossFit, right? So you get both of these stories ending up with recovery from CrossFit or fitness, just fitness in general. I'm biased to the CrossFit modality, but fitness in general is, in my opinion, the prescription. So fast forward, another year, and we started Warrior WOD. I was hearing too many stories of people that were taking their life either quickly through suicide or slowly numbing themselves to death through substance abuse. But the root cause of both of these was their invisible wounds. Post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression, even military sexual trauma. They were wounded, although we couldn't see the wounds. They were still wounded, and they would rather take their life either quickly or slowly over time than to face their demons anymore. And at that moment, both Justin's story, my story, and then just more and more veterans I was hearing going down this path, we had to do something. And we made the conclusion that not another day will we sit on the sideline and not do anything. So that led us to Warrior WOD.
That's an amazing journey of how you came about getting there. And so many of us do travel down that road of high-risk behavior, substance use and abuse, finding healthy addictions that become unhealthy, just so that we become so isolated in our own heads. And you call it talk therapy, I call it friendship, I call it buddy building, where you get comfortable enough with somebody that you can share your life as transparently as possible and know that you're still going to have support from that individual. That's what a friendship is. That's what family is. That's what we built when we deployed with individuals, because we had to be transparent with what was going on, or else it meant somebody's life or limb. And so, I know for myself, on the journey for the last 12 years, it started off with medications in a treatment facility. I didn't like that. I was still young. I was abstaining from alcohol for the first time in my life, doing all sorts of therapies. And eventually I talked the doctor into letting me come off the medications. I found a CrossFit gym while I was still in and had the resources to pay for it. And I loved the community that was there. It's a mixture of civilians, veterans, people in all forms of life, but they're all supporting each other in a healthy lifestyle, to include nutrition, exercise, adequate rest, as well as community building. Like, that's the part that a lot of us miss afterwards, as we get so wrapped up in our own lives, our work, our family, whatever it is that we don't explore outside the walls of our own living room for companionship. Especially when we can just turn on a computer and reach out to somebody and have a conversation, but we need that person-to-person interaction. So I'm really glad that you were able to find that with a group of friends in a box, putting yourselves through what most would consider hell, just for a moment of glory. So I know during one of your times of intense training with your group, you ended up tearing your bicep, I think, too, right?
Yeah, so that's an ongoing struggle. So the CrossFit Open of 2018, I don't remember the workout quite 100%, but it had a ladder of clean and jerks. And I was trying to go for time instead of using any type of technique. So I got through the 135, I got through the 155, I was rolling into the 185, and I was using zero technique. And, I pulled it, it came up and my bicep just wasn't having it. And so it tore. Fast forward, it finally healed. And it was a partial tear, it wasn't a full tear, so it didn't completely roll up. But in August, the same side, I actually tore my pec. So I'm going to surgery July 20th, and they're going to go in and try to repair both of them. What I found out, when I did my MRI, the doctor asked me, and he didn't know my history at all. He goes, "Were you in the military?" And I was like, "I was." And he goes, "Yeah, you got a rotator cuff of someone that was in the military." And what he was telling me is that my chest and bicep, and even my lat to a certain extent, was compensating for a very weak rotator cuff. And he sees that same degradation of the rotator cuff in veterans all of the time. So it was destined to go. When I tore my bicep, I thought it was just me being stupid. I was being stupid and not using the right technique, but there was a bigger problem that led to a torn pec as well.
Wow, that's some serious commitment to the sport, to your mental health, to your community. Now I know that with Warrior WOD, the inspiration comes from a CrossFit type of mentality, but would you mind explaining what it is and kind of also ease the anxiety of potential veterans that would serve to know that you don't have to go as hard as tearing your bicep to be a part of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. So Warrior WOD, we prioritize exercise and nutrition as prescriptions for veterans' recovery from their invisible wounds, to include post-traumatic stress. But really, if you've served our country and you're suffering invisibly, we want to be there and support you, right? And the way that we go about doing that is we provide 6 months of a gym membership. And I personally don't care what gym it is. I want you moving. I want it to be the right gym and the right modality that supports you. We've got veterans in jiu-jitsu. We've got veterans in Gold's Gym and Planet Fitness and Orange Theory and Mom and Pop's gyms down the road and CrossFit. If it's going to motivate you to move, that's the right gym for you, right? So it doesn't have to be as intense as what I went through. I was also being reckless and pushing the limits. So part of the program is knowing your own body and understanding rest days and doing it appropriately. I was not. At the same time, we're going to give 6 months of nutrition coaching. We've all heard the cliche saying that 90% of your results in the gym come from your time in the kitchen, right? And so we want to make sure that the veterans in our program are also benefiting from a nutrient program. The statistics are there. The studies are there. We see a 47% improvement on mental health issues just by having a regular workout routine, and a 30% improvement just for eating healthy, eating whole foods, removing processed foods, and eating healthy. Those two have a direct correlation to your mental health as well. So, we're very purposeful of that. The last piece, and I think is the linchpin and the most powerful piece, and we've both alluded to this, is our Battle Buddy program. So you're going to be paired with another veteran, walked a mile in your shoes, has empathy, right? You and I talked about our time as combat advisors before the show, and immediately, I'm feeling the same things that you went through. And when I talked about my journey, you did as well. And there's something powerful about that. And so they're paired with a battle buddy as well that walks that journey with them to recovery. Last year, we have all of our veterans do surveys every single month. And we use the same PCL5 that the VA uses and other mental health institutions use as well. It gives us the benefit of having a rubric associated, and we could track progression, right? We saw an 18% decrease in PTSD symptoms across 6 months. My question is, name an antidepressant that can do that. And if you're wondering if there is one, there isn't, right? 18%, that's extremely meaningful. And one of the questions that resonated the most with me is, have you lost enjoyment of things you used to enjoy doing? That's one of our questions, right? and the veteran picks 0 through 5 based off of how severe that is. Across the 6 months, 33% improvement. Imagine that for a second. A third better. You're enjoying life a third better than you were before you came to our program 6 months ago. To me, that's meaningful. It is through exercise and nutrition that we're seeing recovery actually happen. And every single day I get messages that, not only from a physical standpoint, hey, I've lost 13% body fat, I've lost 30 pounds, but then I hear from a mental health perspective, I was contemplating taking my life and now I'm not, right? That when I see those messages or get those phone calls, man, I can't tell you how excited I get for what we're able to accomplish. And I go back to the battle buddies. It's through those battle buddies that we're having these kind of meaningful results and really empowering our veterans, our nation heroes to recover.
Your program Warrior WOD sounds like it hits on two of the 5 pillars that we discuss on this show: physical health and community building or relational health. And when people are trying to evaluate their physical health, oftentimes they'll look in the mirror, they'll look on the scale, they'll look in their fridge and kind of evaluate, am I doing good? Am I doing bad? We're often not thinking about, am I moving the way that I want to be moving? Am I enjoying the things that I want to be enjoying outside of experiencing physical pain, limitations, or even mental blockages to get out the door? And that physical exercise, science shows it raises the necessary chemicals to improve our mood. And if you do that consistently long enough, you're going to have a longer term effect of raised endorphins and doing something healthy. And then you couple that with the nutrition that we're consuming. I know from firsthand experience, small changes to a diet, like consuming edible probiotic foods, like kimchi, sauerkrauts, kombucha drinks, decrease inflammation in the body. And I'm not on most of. I take an antihistamine every now and then, just because I adjusted my diet back in August. I ended up coming off of almost 20 pills a day, and it was going up. It was going up because once you get on that cycle, at least for me, you're trying to figure out the right dosage that's not going to make you lethargic, and then you have a pill for your nightmares, a pill to wake you up, a pill to reduce the anxiety, a pill to improve your depression. And I just got so tired. I didn't feel like myself. I felt like I was in a fog. It was the longest I ever committed to being on medications, and I was on medications for almost 2 years following a near suicide attempt where I hadn't been on medication for nearly 10 years. And I felt like my life was pretty well. I ended up stacking on about 30 pounds during that period and just started feeling worse and worse and worse about myself. But even just small adjustments in the diet, and I think my workout regime back then was probably about 2 to 3 times a week. It doesn't take much to start seeing a marked improvement. And I love that you guys focus on both of those, the nutrition as well as the physical fitness. But then that third aspect, that community, once you introduce, especially as you mentioned, an empathetic mentor or battle buddy to help keep you on the right track, that friendship, that transparency starts to come out, and you can start to actually recover from some of the stuff that weighed us down for so long. So if there are any veterans out there looking for guidance on how to get involved with something like Warrior WOD, from the receiving side or the mentorship side, and becoming a mentor, how would they go about getting involved with Warrior WOD?
Yeah, so our website is warriorwod.org, and that's WOD. I get this question daily. What does WOD stand for? It's workout of the day. But it's warriorwod.org, and there you could either apply for our support, or you could apply to be a volunteer if you're not a veteran, and you can also volunteer to be a battle buddy or a mentor. A quick plug about the battle buddies. One of the things we're seeing, a lot of the veterans that go through our program want to become battle buddies because they want to continue to stay connected because of that community that you talked about, right? And they find recovery in just simply paying it forward, right? And so there's an element of recovery in that piece as well. But very easy to find us on our website. We also have social media across the board, The Warrior WOD. And everything comes to my inbox. So if you are suffering, even if you don't want to go through our program, you just need someone to talk to, feel free, hit me up on Instagram, through our chat, any of our other social media mediums, or, my email is super easy. Anybody can reach out to me, phil@warriorwod.org. If you're struggling, you've got an ear through me, and you've got someone that's going to listen and just be there with you. So anybody can reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Phil, for just putting that information out there, being available. With everything that you do and everything that you've experienced, I'd like to know, how do you continue to accomplish your goals and still be present for your friends and family? Because running a business or running a nonprofit like Warrior WOD and working a full-time job is hard enough for a lot of people. How do you go about setting yourself up for success?
Couple things. First, my wife is absolutely incredible. She makes sure that social aspect and being there with my friends and family, that I don't lose sight of that. We've got a 16-month-old daughter as well, so that adds to that as well, to that complexity. But I couldn't do it without my wife. There's no way I can do it without her support and her focusing me where I towards family and friends. But I think the satisfaction of helping other veterans and being a part of the solution and these statistics that we talked about earlier, that drives my motivation to make sure that every other aspect of my life is going well. And it's one of those things where if I'm going to lead this organization and if I am going to be at the forefront of what Warrior WOD's doing, I have to be a good example of it, right? And the Marine Corps has Ductus Exemplo, lead by example, and that's one of the things that is a bedrock for both my 9-to-5 job and Warrior WOD and my family, right? And to do that, to be that example for the veterans that are on their journey, I have to make sure that I'm able to hit my camaraderie with my family and friends. I need to demonstrate that it is through empathy that we are able to recover. So I know that was kind of a long-winded way of explaining it, but I think it boils down to my wife and then the lessons that I learned in the Marine Corps.
That's incredible, and you have an incredible journey. I would love to continue to talk to you. And before I let you go, I've got to ask you one final question, and that's, what would you say to somebody that's currently struggling?
Open up. You let somebody know. Don't suffer in silence. We need you. We absolutely need you. There's no less than 1,000 people that are going to rely on you for the rest of your life. And those individuals need you for the long term. So reach out, get help. Again, I'm a resource. Danny, I know that you're a resource to many people as well, and you have a very open heart. But do not suffer in silence. And whether it's Warrior WOD or whether it's another organization that's doing something similar, maybe with a different modality, get involved with one of our programs. We're standing up. There's 5,000 veteran support organizations standing up around the country, largely because the need is so great, right? And we recognize that one death is too many, that one person struggling is too many. We're here for you. And I open up my program and my arms to anybody that is suffering. And there's zero judgment. There's only empathy and love for anybody that needs our help.
Phil, thank you so much for those words. And thank you so much for your time here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Yeah, thank you.